What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to a Thursday show, gang. Another week flying by. Thursday slate, little three-gamer to deal with today. Nothing crazy, another light slate. Ugly one last night. Knicks really let us down. Let me down in the NBA Cup just, for advancing. Not a great Knicks game, not a great performance by Jalen Brunson. We had a good Josh Hart game. A decent Cat game. Looked like we were going to be a rocket ship with Cat with all those shares we had. Put up, 46 and change, I think, in the first half. And then just another 20 on top. So we got a very good game, but we didn't quite get where we wanted to be. Some of the other pieces and parts failed along the way. Difficult to make that up in a two-gamer, There's not a lot of other options to go with, so fell a little bit short last night, but back at it today for another short slate. 3 games on deck. We've got a lot of information about this slate already. It's kind of fun how it's coming together. We got the Jason Tatum was like the really big piece early in the day, and we got that news fairly early on. So we kind of know the shape of what Boston's going to look like. The only questionable on our list for the entire day is, that is not the, there it is Jalen Duren. He was added to the injury report, so maybe could be leaning a little bit toward don't play. But we'll deal with it as it comes up. He's our one questionable today, so nice and easy. A couple people here hanging out. Cujo's here. Happy Thursday, pal. Michael Knack walking in the door. Good to see you, buddy. Welcome to everybody else who's out there. Hit the like button as we get started. Hit the subscribe, all those fun things. I'll plug the site in a little bit. Somebody remind me to plug the site today. I forgot to do that till the very end of the show yesterday. Every now and then I should be mentioning rotoscouts.com. Check it out. But, really interesting one. We can just kind of dive on in. Hopefully you guys' days are going well. Hopefully the weeks went well. We've got a Thursday night football game to deal with later tonight. Projections for the football slate, projections for a giant hockey slate are both up on the site in addition to these basketball projections. 14-game hockey slate tonight. That was fun to project. Got to go through all those line combinations. It drives me bananas because a lot of times it's just like, Johnny's going to move from line 2 to line 3, and the guy who was playing left wing on line 3 is now going to play right wing on line 2, and blah, blah, blah. It's just so much to keep up with every day. So when there's 28 teams to update line combinations for, it can get a little cumbersome. But it's fun, though. Anyway, basketball. Celtics still favored by 11.5 in a home game against the Pistons. 225-point total. Again, no Jason Tatum there. They're also without Sammy Hauser, but obviously still a ton of pieces for the Celtics. And if you're looking at the board right now, you can see how many of those Celtics are coming up as massive pieces of this slate. I'm giving basically full credit to Jalen, Derek White, and Kristaps for what the numbers that they've put up in terms of rate have been. And I say full credit, meaning Jalen's at technically 1.6 something, I think it was, in that situation over 100 minutes this year. I obviously didn't take him that high up. I gave him credit for his full number for this year and last year, essentially. Same thing with Kristaps. Same thing with Derek White. And these guys just jump into the 40s as far as fantasy point projection, and they become just massive, massive pieces. Are all 3 of those guys definitely going to get there with Drew coming along for the ride at a slightly lower projection? Not necessarily. Are all 4 of those guys absolutely fundamental to the slate? Definitely. So you're going to be getting multiple Celtics in most of your lineups, and it's going to be from the top end guys. You do have Peyton Pritchard lingering down here, decent amount of shares of him, but we're undercutting the field a little bit in that sim. I'm sure Horford's in here somewhere. Yeah, there's Horford. So it's going to be a big Celtics day. On the Pistons side, we could see some value created if Duren doesn't go. Most likely just odds and ends and then arcade shares, wherever we got those. I don't see a lot of Detroit, just scanning the team names here. Timmy Hardaway, the first Piston. That's never a good sign. So it doesn't look like we came up with a lot of Detroit, which makes sense. I mean, big underdogs like that going up against a Boston team that's still very, very sound and one of the top teams in the league, even with no Tatum. Toronto and Miami. Miami favored by 10 in a home game over Toronto. 224.5 point total there. Toronto, no Scotty Barnes for a little while again. So we're going to get back to that kind of a situation where, potentially RJ could see an opportunity to succeed. I've got him projected pretty high, kind of back to that territory we were seeing earlier in the season, and he's been consistent at 1.18, 1.23. But we're a little bit below the field on RJ. Getting to a little bit Grady Dick on the FanDuel slate, it looks like. We'll get into all of these. I'm sure there's Pirtle and Mogbo. So both of those guys are coming up significantly. Pirtle, 30% on FanDuel at center makes a lot of sense. We're getting a decent chunk of Yves Missi as well at 5,600 at center only. A lot of missing pieces on the New Orleans side of that game. That game, the late one, technically late. It's, 2 7:30s and an 8 o'clock today? Nice little sprint slate through the 3 games. New Orleans, 7-point dogs at home. 231-point total in that one. Sacramento visiting New Orleans. Sacramento definitely going to be a source of high-end plays as far as just the talent level on that team. But again, it doesn't look like outside of Keegan Murray, we got 45% of them here, 33% of them on DraftKings. The top of our board is just dominated by those New Orleans and Boston shares. But we've got reasonable options. There's Sabonis and Fox right there. They both did come up quite a bit on FanDuel. A little bit less so on DraftKings. But we'll deal with it as we get there. Again, as far as the news we're waiting on, Jalen Duren currently questionable. Jimmy Butler's probable. Drew Smith we already know is available. Out. Jason Tatum's already out, so is Sammy Hauser, so is Jaden Springer. Scotty Barnes, Bruce Brown, Emmanuel Quickley. Pele Larson is technically doubtful, but seems like he's not going to go. Josh Richardson, Devin Carter, Trey Lyles, Jose Alvarado, Javonte Green, Jordan Hawkins, Brandon Ingram, Carlo Makovich, Jeremiah Robinson, Earl, and Zion all still out. So that creates a lot of that New Orleans value that you're seeing. And that's it. So we're keeping our eyes out for the Jalen Duren news. See if anything's popped up in the last couple minutes. Nope. So what do you say we dive on in? Bunch of people here. Rocket Sauce says, Missi, with an exclamation point. Mamba says, sup, Roto fam, Cujo, MK, Tarek, good luck. Good luck to you too, pal. Good to see you. Take a swig of coffee here. Busy couple of days coming up. If you're following the site, I'm going to have football main slate projections will be up tonight because I just got to get ahead of the curve a little bit here as far as my usual schedule goes. So you should have those tomorrow. I'm going to try and get the framework of the groups and optimizers article, at least with like the players and the basic information up there tonight, or at least during the day tomorrow. Reason being, I think I mentioned it on yesterday's show. Saturday night, I'm going to be out of action. I've got my niece's annual performance of the Nutcracker. As she gets older, she goes into more and more advanced roles, so it's always fun to keep on going and seeing the show. But that'll put me out of commission on Saturday night for a big chunk of Saturday night, which sets me back as far as getting all that DFS content done. So that means you guys will get it early. So that's a little bonus for you. Only 2 NBA games on Saturday. There will be a minor impact there. Live news is not going to be available. I'm going to have the projections up for you on Saturday afternoon. I'm going to give you, if X happens, then do Y, and I'll put that into the notes. But I won't be sitting at the computer, but it's only 2 games. We should be okay with that. And that maybe Christmas Day will be a little bit funky as far as updates. Outside of those, that day and Christmas, I don't think we're going to have any other missed action throughout the season, but who knows. Anyway, so we get into things. All that stuff's available at rotoscouts.com for anybody new. Everything costs under $1 a day. Access to all of it. NBA, NHL, NFL, MLB when that's back. Under $1 a day. So check out rotoscouts.com. Let's dive in positionally before we lose people. People don't like to hear advertising. Nope, that is not what I wanted to be sorting. Same slate across sites, so we can go by DK positioning, and we've just got clear chunks ahead of the field on all 4 of Trey Murphy, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Drew Holiday. And every single one of them just makes complete sense. Murphy at 6,400 would have been coming up at a decent clip anyway, even if we didn't lose Tatum and one of the most expensive players off of this slate. And you can see it kind of in the value scores. Just everybody on this entire slate is not expensive. Our most expensive FanDuel player today is 9,600. Our most expensive DraftKings player is also 9,600. So there's really a lot of comfy spend. Look at all these 5+ value guys and look at the names associated with those. Murphy, White, Brown, Holiday, Porzingis, Messi, Jones, Boston. Those three are a little bit lesser. Keegan Murray, Jimmy Butler, Jakob Poeltl. I mean, that is a bunch of guys, and you've got a few more lingering down here. DraftKings, you've got a few 6+, and then a couple 5+, and then a big chunk of guys between 5 and 5.5 before we start fading for value. We are getting very concentrated ownership out of these sims as far as what the top end plays of the day are, and they seem to fit together pretty well based on how these are all going together. You've got multi-position on all three of these guys. Only one of them conflicts with the point guard share for Drew. Granted, they're from the same team. Not that we care, right? We don't really care if we're getting 3 Celtics, if we're getting 4 Celtics. I think there's enough there, and there's just such low pricing across the slate that you can afford the fact that it's 3 of their mid-range guys or 3 of their upper-end guys. Getting Jalen with no Tatum at 8,200 is ridiculous. That's a peak value. That is one of the top plays that you can make. So even with him being popular, you just want to be there. Same thing with Zinger. He's not on this board because we're sorted to guards, but he's going to be just as popular and just as crucial. Both of those guys put up monster numbers over the past year plus with no Tatum out there. Murphy, in general, just a 0.9 is a 0.96 per minute player on DraftKings this season. 0.94 last year on the FanDuel scale. That was 0.94 this year, 0.93 last year. But a little minor uptick in usage with all the missing bodies in New Orleans. And with additional missing bodies today, one would expect we would see even more increased usage out of Trey Murphy. Just looks like a great spot. The price is right. He fits in perfectly with all these other guys. Shooting guard and small forward value on both sites. You can move a lot of pieces around among those top-end players. Do you have to be at this ridiculous level with all of these guys and, core it? Not necessarily. There's plenty of moving parts as far as getting additional shares of some of these, swapping them in and out for some of these to create differentiation in lineups. Do you necessarily want like an exact concentration of all 5 of those guys in every lineup? No, not necessarily, but like 3 of those 5, and then like the other 2 guys from this next tier down is exactly how you want to be building your lineups. And even on a 3-gamer, that differentiation will take care of itself in a lot of cases. The crunch of math creates so many combinations, especially when you take multi-position and everything into account. Do you have to worry about dupes on a 3-gamer? Yeah. I mean, there will be the most popular lineups. If you went to Awesemo and you ran off their optimal 2 minutes before lock and you just dropped that in, that would probably be duped 15, 20 times. But I think you're A-okay as far as just letting the chips fall with the combinations if you're using any kind of sim results, randomness. As long as you're not playing like the pure optimal, the cash lineup, you're probably not going to be duped so many times that it bites your profitability too much. As far as Drew Holiday goes, he is the guy who, from his 0.89 last year to his 0.85 on DraftKings this year, 0.82 this year on FanDuel, we've seen a little bit of a slide from an already lighter per minute guy than the others, but that's why he's priced at 58 compared to where the other guys are. He's cheaper than Derek White is by a pretty fair margin. So getting to a big chunk of Drew Holiday, who does see an uptick in per minute himself as well with no Tatum there, I think it makes tons of sense. I don't know that we would have been going nuts for Drew in this situation if Tatum was in, but with Tatum out at those prices, it just drives him up a little bit. He goes from like 0.82 to like 0.9 something. So we get a little bit more. 56%. We're hard over the field on the FanDuel slate, which I like. Is point guard and shooting guard eligible over there? 5,000 point guard only on DraftKings. We're closer to the field, but we still got nearly 60% of them. That is perfectly fine. Brendan Boston, just kind of cheap, 4,700 with reasonable expectation of minutes. There's a little fan below the table. I talked about this like months ago, but I took the side off of the computer because it was doing the overheating thing and like freezing us up. So now I just have like a little tabletop fan like blowing directly into the computer, which I'm sure isn't good for it at all because it's just dust blowing into the computer ultimately. But it also just starts clicking and making a little noise down there. I had to fix that. Michael Knack says, help chat. Jennings tonight or Adams season long? I'm leaning Jennings. I have both of those players, and I have Adams in my lineup right now. But that is very, very close. I don't think you're making a wrong decision either way. I also forget who the Jets are playing. That is... We jumped from like 7th to like 4th the other day in the points league. Come on, load, you bastard. There we go. Just to take my opinion out of it, since I haven't really dug into the Jets game. Oh, the Jets are playing Jacksonville too. That is, yeah, it's Devontae. But what I was going to say is using industry consensus rankings, Jennings is wide receiver 17 and Adams is wide receiver 10 for this week. So I think it's pretty clearly Devontae. And with them facing the Jaguars, I think that's definitely beneficial. Yeah, sure thing, bub. I do think, yeah, and to answer your other question, Mike, I do think that, I keep calling you Mike. I don't know if you go by Mike or hate Mike. A lot of Michaels that I know hate being called Mike, so apologies for that if you do. Michael, Pritchard would be a reasonable pivot. He's just a couple spots further down. We'll get to him in right now. Right, 9.3% and below the field on the FanDuel slate for 5,700. That's probably just getting consumed a little bit by all those Drew shares for 100 more with a few more minutes applied. With a little bit, it's actually, I think it was almost a dead same rate. I have them both at 0.98 tonight. So the difference that you're seeing in the Drew shares and the Pritchard shares is essentially the 3 minutes that is different between Drew and Pritchard. And there's plenty of reason to believe that Pritchard would play 30, 31, close in on 32. So, yeah, that is a perfectly fine pivot. You can easily bring Pritchard back up to the field, sacrifice a few of those Drew shares, balance that out. I think that's not necessarily a bad idea. Mike's fine. All right, cool. I'm sure I'll go back and forth as time goes on. But, yeah, I think that's a very much a back and forth spot. And it could, honestly, whichever one of those two guys performs better, and most specifically, if it's Pritchard at lower popularity, I do think that could be a pretty important inflection point for the slate. So I think you want to have a fair amount of both of them. Going by the Sims, we're getting a much bigger piece of Drew, and that's actually different now that I'm absorbing the DraftKings price. For 400 more on DraftKings, that has an impact on the Pritchard value. We're getting him 18% of the time. We've got double the amount of Pritchard overall on the DraftKings slate than we do on FanDuel. But he actually... Well, that's funky. 476 against 5,700 on FanDuel. Oh, was I... I'm not processing this right. Hold on. 54. You're watching me Mitch McConnell in real time here. 54. That's what the difference is. All right. Whew, excuse the brain skip there, gang. So the value score is higher because his salary on DraftKings. That's what threw me, the 528, and then I remembered he's 57 on the FanDuel slate. So that is a different value score. You're getting more of them on DraftKings because he's more points per dollar valuable on DraftKings, but that salary difference on DraftKings at 54 versus the 5,000 for Drew is impactful to the Drew or Pritchard part of the conversation. Still the same thing. You still do want to have quite a bit of Pritchard, but we're undercutting the field a little bit harder on DraftKings, and it's not quite the pivot that it is because it's a $400 price uptick versus a $100 price downtick. Right? So it's a more effective back and forth on FanDuel between the two. Whereas there's just clear demonstration of value for Pritchard, but not more so than Drew. 6.27 value score versus the 5.28. It's almost a full point of value additional. Different conversation across sites. Trip me up with that one, Mike. So Brandon Boston, again, I was getting to that one a little bit. 44% owned on the FanDuel slate for just 4,700. Shooting guard only, not ideal, but with all the movability of basically everybody else that qualifies at guard outside of maybe Pritchard and Fox and Murray at point, I think you're perfectly fine rostering a nice big chunk of Brandon Boston. He's getting his minutes back, playing 28 a night, and potentially upside for more with a lot of missing bodies there. 0.91 per minute so far on the season. He was a 0.82 player last year, so a decent chunk of usage last year. Claws back usage in this situation, so I like the upside. Not exactly a terrifying opponent there, so should be perfectly viable as far as scoring goes. 44% FanDuel, 35% level with the field on the DraftKings slate. He's a solid contributor. He adds a decent assist rate, 18.6% assist rate to his 54.1% true shooting. He's going to live and die a lot with the scoring. Went out the other day, 28.2 minutes, put up a 24.1 on the FanDuel scale. For the season so far, it's right on a 25-point average, which is essentially what I've got him projected for. So I've got him projected like right at what he's been doing, and I think there's reason to believe that those minutes could creep over 30. There's reason to believe that there is a little bit of upside for the performance as well. Tyler Hero looking like an is who he is spot. Very solid, rock solid minutes on a short slate is always worth paying for. 7,800 both guard spots. We got him 20% level with the field on FanDuel. 77 point guard only. We got him a little less than the field. Still the same, 19, 20%, but a little lighter than the field on the DraftKings slate. Still pushing a 5.28 value score, but we're looking for 5.5. I think the multi-position probably impacts him a little bit, but still at worst a good play. And honestly, with Hero's just random upside, there where he goes out and knocks down a few additional shots, there's always a little bit of flex upward with Tyler Hero. You capture the ceiling day on a slate like this on a 3-gamer. Again, with him being owned in just this 20% range, that is one of your more believable guys where you could say, all right, field's 20, I'm going to be 30. I'm going to build a position on Tyler Hero. Not necessarily out of anything from the game environment, anything looking noteworthy outside of the fact that the field's only here, where the field will be in more advanced shares on a lot of these guys. So it's like a rotational piece within your lineups. He's not bad to get to, I think, a little bit more. I think I'd rather be a little bit ahead than a little bit behind. Well, level with the field maybe on DraftKings. You could swing it either way. Since the sim wants us a little behind, I won't say that I'd rather be a little ahead over here. That'll apply on FanDuel a little bit more. We get a little bit advanced beyond the field, I think, on that play. Because he's one of the few guys who has demonstrable upside beyond the ones that everybody's going to be on. Dunk from the same group really doesn't have that kind of upside unless we get a just outlier day. He's fine, but one share on FanDuel. We got him 15% of the time on DraftKings. That is below the field. 4,200 at the shooting guard spot. We're just getting so much of all these guys because we don't need to save our money today. Right? And then we've got $4,800 point guard shooting guard there. So he's not a bad value at 5.22 on the value scale. He's a 0.86 per minute player on DraftKings this year. 56.5% true shooting, a 14% assist rate. What's he shooting from three? 38.8%. Not bad. Taking 6 a game. So if you get that, like I said, if you get that outlier day where instead of 2.6 out of his 6.6, we make 4 or 5 out of 8, then you get an upside day from Dunk for the price. So he's a mix and match piece. I think that you're safe being around the 15%, little undercut to the field. That is a play that I'm happy to let the field have more often than not, unless he's stepping into something overly exceptional. And I don't think we've really got that. Darren Fox, 21% undercut to the field on FanDuel. DeJounte Murray, 16% undercut to the field on FanDuel. Those guys are at 14 and 12% and both undercutting the field on the DraftKings slate. Either one of those guys you can definitely grab a few additional shares of, level back to the field. But really, they're at the point where that's probably all you're doing with them is just getting yourself to the field. So there's probably sharper ways to spend those shares. But I do think that these exposures at worst are about where you'd want to be on two of the better overall per minute performers, two of the better overall upside guards of the day. As far as the raw projections go, that is what? Number 2 and number 4 on FanDuel among guards. And number 2 and 3 on DraftKings. So you do want those guys for the raw scoring sense. They're both 1.18 per minute players on FanDuel, 1.21 for Fox, 1.18 for Murray. A little bit of a price difference between them. 9,000 and 8,100, considering, there is a 3-minute difference in the projection, but considering on FanDuel in particular that they're putting up the exact same rate so far this year, a $900 price difference at the same position is kind of noteworthy. It didn't lead us to more DeJounte Murray shares because we just, frankly, don't need the savings all that much today. But that is something to bear in mind. Like if you're stuck on if I had 100 more in this lineup, I could get Fox. Remember that for 800 less than that, you can get Murray. Just plug him into that spot and then see what else that $800 buys you. Timmy Hardaway, again, nobody's favorite. 10% on the DraftKings slate, below the field. This is honestly always where I want to find myself with Timmy. I'm happy to have a few shares. I'd rather be below the field unless there's something truly, truly exceptional about his situation. You're more often than not just dealing with this very low end, regardless of whether he sees usage or not, per minute performer. 0.81 last year, and honestly, I would have guessed it was lower if I wasn't looking at it. 22, that was on 22% usage. In his role with the Pistons, we're down to 14.2% usage. 0.53 per minute on FanDuel, 0.57 on DraftKings. He's only 38, 37. He is a very low-cost player. On a different version of this slate where they had chosen to price a couple guys above 10,000, let's say, or if we had Tatum to pay up for, different version of this slate, that $3,000 price is probably highly, highly valuable. I think today, unless something emerges that we're suddenly needing to spend money, and I don't think that's possible, I really don't see the value in going to Timmy too much. 10% is fine. Let the field have the rest on DraftKings. 4% on FanDuel. If I even get to that, I'll be all right with it, but that is not a compelling player. 16.6 FanDuel points in 30.6 minutes the other day. Averages, again, 28 minutes. To put a per game number on his fantasy output this season, he's averaging 14.6 on FanDuel, 15.6 on DraftKings. That's what you get at 0.53 over 28, 30 minutes. See how that math works? CJ McCollum, 18% FanDuel, 8% DraftKings, undercutting the field on both sites. For 72 at shooting guard, point guard, power guard, either way. There's a P in it. I'm skipping all over the place today. Don't know why. I do know why. All out of pot. Most people would be the other way around. Not me. So yeah, CJ, again, with the shorthanded Pellies, I don't begrudge anybody a few additional shares of CJ. 18% on FanDuel is plenty for me. We're below the field. We're taking a pretty solid position there. We've got so much going through the position at better pricing with better or similar projections that I just don't really see the need to really press the gas pedal down too much on CJ, even though it is a decent spot for him. 1.04 per minute on FanDuel, 1.05 on DraftKings. We got him 8%, pretty hard undercut to the field on DraftKings as well. 5.01 value score does set him apart from everybody down this way, including Cade for 96. It's got him in similar territory to DeJounte Murray. It's got him in similar territory to De'Aaron Fox. So I do think that McCollum is a very usable piece on this slate. But as far as the true numbers of the combinatorics of everything go, you don't really need that much of them. And it does look like we're kind of leaving him to the field while still taking a fair share on FanDuel. Sub 10% exposed on DraftKings, though. If you want 10, 12, you're not making a mistake. It's just odds and ends shares here and there, but I certainly wouldn't take him to like 25 on DK against that 8%. Again, unless something changes. Drew Smith, 6% mix and match piece on both sites for 39.35. Again, I just think it's the same as the Timmy situation, except you're dealing with a better per minute performer. So between the two, I'd probably lean into Drew Smith a little bit, even with fewer minutes. You can see he's already projecting out slightly ahead of Timmy on both sites, even in substantially fewer minutes. He's just a better overall performer. But it just falls into that category of I don't think we necessarily need $3,500, $3,900 guys on this 3-gamer today. If you're in a situation where it's, man, I'm hand building this one and I could click that guy in if I only had a $3,000 guy, sure, plug him in. That's fine. And that's what his, 6, we got him 6 on both, figure he's 10, 12 on both. That's where that ownership is coming from. There's got to be one combination in here that you need that for, and that's creating whatever exposure he's getting. But if you're not getting a lot of that combination of whoever it is, $8,200 Jalen and, 2 of the other $8,000 or $9,000 guys, if that combination's not coming up much for you, you're not going to get much of the $3,000 guys. I wouldn't expect. Davion Mitchell and Grady Dick, both more important to the FanDuel slate. Again, no Scotty has a pretty dramatic impact on Toronto. Grady Dick was fairly successful as a value guy or mid-range guy in this situation earlier in the season. It's got him up to 0.81 still for the season, 22% usage overall for the season. Last year, he's just a 0.65 player on 16.7%. So there should be plenty more for Grady Dick to do today. At 5,800 on DraftKings with only one position, he did not come up very much at all. 2% and an undercut to the field. On FanDuel, just 5,200, shooting guard and small forward. He's in nearly half of all lineups and above the field. Very, very different play site to site. He gains a lot of ground for that discount, and he gains a lot of ground for that multi-position. I think he's playable on DK, but that 4.92 value just kind of makes him an also-ran among all these high-end options. So a guy to swap in and out of a few shares of lineups, perfectly fine. If you end up at 8%, 6%, I would probably look to keep him under 10 on DraftKings. You can go wild with him on FanDuel, it looks like. And then Mitchell, he for me is more in the Timmy bucket. I don't love that we're getting him 28% of the time. It does look like that is our $3,000 guy on the FanDuel slate going into the point guard. So maybe there's something just positionally that's blocking off those shooting guard shares. It's probably getting some of this on FanDuel. I don't love Davion Mitchell, but with 30 minutes relatively secure, he's a 0.67 per minute player, which is the reason that I don't really like him. But that is an effective enough price times minute times rates equation here that some shares of them. I think I'd much rather be in this kind of territory. Like if I was playing, if it was a day where somebody said, all right, to save your life, you have to play Davion Mitchell in a lineup and you have to choose the correct site, and that's all you have to do. It is most definitely on DraftKings. I'd rather be in this position. 28% feels aggressive, even if the field is there. But it is a 5+ value score. I mean, the numbers are there to support the play. But that is one that you could easily see just dropping off the face of the earth and completely failing. Very low-end performer as far as a per minute. Nobody else really among guards. We got a few shares, onesie, twosie shares on Malik Monk, on Jaden Ivey. Both of those guys could succeed. 1.05, 0.98 per minute, respectively, on FanDuel. 1.07, 1.03 on DraftKings. They really didn't come up over there either. Neither guy is mispriced. 71, 62, 73, 72. Multi-guard eligible on both sites. They're just getting chewed up by all these guys. What you can safely probably consider both of these guys, though, Malik Monk and Jaden Ivey. It doesn't really apply to Cade just because of his much, much higher price than those guys. But I do think these guys are reasonable rotation pieces to like drop in for, one share here, one share there. That's where they're picking up any of their ownership. But if the field is in the low single digits on either of those guys, then there's enough just raw ability there to say, all right, as a differentiator in a lineup, once the games have started, these plays become somewhat different. So as a afterlock, if that guy's in my lineup play, it's a differentiation piece. People don't necessarily have that. So those guys are reasonable considerations for that kind of a role, but they're never going to math out well against these kind of numbers for those guys up there. Cade at 96 is kind of falling by the wayside. Just 2% on FanDuel. One share of him across 150 lineups for 9,600 on DraftKings. Same price across sites. Point guard only on both sides. Not an ideal spot for Cade. You're just ramming him into that Boston defense. I don't love it. He's a terrific player. 1.31 per minute. One of the few 30% usage guys in all situations that exist on this entire slate. But man, there's a big path to an underperformance. And it's Cade could go out there and, most likely, obviously, will put up 40, 45 fantasy points. But that's not going to get you where you need to be today. Or more, unless all of these guys also fail. Taking a few more shares of Cade is fine. The upside is there. It exists in the same way that I was talking about Monk and Ivy. It's just at a different price tier. If you're going to Cade, he is our most expensive player on both sides. It was 96 on both sides, right? So you're sacrificing quite a bit of other guys to get there. It's not like I'm just going from Fox, who we didn't really get that much more than the field, or I'm not just going from Jalen at 86 directly to Cade, because there's another 1,000 to make up there. On DraftKings, it's even more. So that's like a 3-position swap to get any Cade into your lineups. Maybe Cade is the guy where the $3,500 guys tie in a little bit more. Reason to expect that. If that's the case, I would think that it's probably Timmy on DraftKings that goes right in line with your Cade shares. Right? You get Cade instead of Drew, or Cade instead of White, probably more accurately. And then you get Jalen. That's 14.9 and 13.3. So we've got money to spend there. So that would be like a very, I don't know if I want to use the word reasonable there, but that would be kind of the approach. I think you're swapping 2 for 2 there, and then it does actually leave you a little bit of money to upgrade another spot. But know that you're taking 2 of the best overall plays on the entire slate off the board to get to a dramatic underperformer in a points per minute sense, and then a very good point guard in a bad spot. Right? So it's probably not the best plan. Terry Rozier, mix and match. 1 share on FanDuel. Below the field at 1.3% on DraftKings. Not all that relevant. Noble RD Entertainment. Yo, what's going on, man? Mike's saying, do we want to go to Jacoby Walter or Drew Smith on FanDuel? There's Jacoby. 4% below the field. Drew was 6% harder undercut to the field. I'll say Drew just because I've got him at the exact same minutes allocation. He's 100 less, and he's the better per minute guy. So even though across 150 lineups, we got him in fewer shares than the field did, we did get more of him than we got of Jacoby Walter. And 0.79 so far for Jacoby versus the 0.90 for Drew Smith this year and 0.82 last year. But good question. Those guys are directly comparable. But yeah, I would lean Drew slightly while still not loving that spot. Nothing really on the DraftKings side of the board. Didn't really get much of Kevin Huerter or any of Kevin Huerter. He's another guy who's, mix and match quality. He's not mispriced at 48, 49. Reasonable expectation of 22 to 25 minutes. 0.83 per minute is okay, but you're probably getting what's an upside game from Huerter today? Because he's not going to go out and put up a 3 standard deviation game. So you're talking about an 8-point swing maybe. 26 points for your 4,800 is fine. It won't crush your lineup, but you're probably going to get outpaced by, I don't know if it's Dunk necessarily at the same price, Brendan Boston, let's say, who's projected for that 25 for essentially the same price. I think Kevin Huerter just gets kind of run off the floor as far as scoring goes today. Fantasy scoring, not like in the game environment. Keon Ellis, same deal with a lower end projection. No real love there. Nobody else is relevant on the guard board here. We can switch to forwards. Talk about half the same guys. Millie, I expect you flat out just changed the name, right? Don't you just come in the next day with I won the Millie? Or like I'm a winner, I won the Millie? It's just a flat name change, man. Good to see you, buddy. So we talked about Trey already, but just to reiterate, 85% and above the field on FanDuel, 86% and above the field on DraftKings. Jaylen Brown, 66%, 79% across sites above the field on both. Herb Jones is our first forward guy that we didn't already talk about. Another guy just benefiting from the minutes crunch in New Orleans. 36 is where I've got him projected. He played 37.5 the other day, put up just a 25.1. That reflects his days where he has lighter per minute numbers. He's a guy who is somewhat of a collector of fantasy points, but he's also capable of spiking decent upside days like a lot of those guys are who rely on stocks and defensive stats. And especially when they're going to need him to do a little bit more offensive work, I do like that spot for Herb Jones. I think he's realistic. 5,300 power forward and small forward on FanDuel. 5,000 small forward, power forward on DraftKings for 38.6 at 38.6% exposed and level with the field. It's perfectly fine. I think you could even take a few more shares. We're already very exposed to him, though. You don't have to. But I think that's an advantageous spot. And we got way more of it on the FanDuel slate. Different play across sites, obviously. Just most likely based on positioning of other guys that are blocking out the Herb shares on DraftKings. Because, that is a 5.62 value score over there. That is a significant value. Boston we talked about already, but for all the same reasons as Herb, should see some success and honestly could crest 30 minutes with ease today. Keegan Murray, interesting player. 45% on FanDuel, well above the field. On DraftKings, 33% level with the field for 5,700 across both forward spots. Ultimately, it's an is who he is kind of a spot for Keegan Murray. He's a 0.76 per minute performer, but I think he's one of the more realistic guys from like this mid-range where you're just going to need some plug-and-play options in the fives. Otherwise, you're not able to fill a lineup out because you've spent too much at each position, or you're just leaving 1,000 and change on the table or hundreds on the table. So I think Keegan Murray's going to absorb shares just through that. Not much of a contributor. That's why the rate is at 0.76. We're dealing with 51.8% true shooting, 10.2% rebounding rate. He's making just 29% of his 5.5 threes a game, though. So he's just out there chucking up bricks right now. If he manages to knock down a couple of those, you find immediate value at that price. So like the curve of his day, is based on just 2 or 3 minor events that could create an immediate just, puts him on a different level. It's not like a directly binary, succeed or fail option, but it's closer to that given there's like a direct path to success for him. Jimmy Butler, another guy, from the B+ tier, let's say. I hesitate to call Jimmy a star at this point, but 50% of them because he only cost 7,500 small forward and power forward on the FanDuel slate. 7,400, we got him 30%, a little bit less than the field, but still a significant piece of our lineups. On this slate, Jimmy's got major upside. 1.11 per minute overall on DraftKings this year, 1.12 on FanDuel. It was basically the same performance as last year. He's seen a bit of a shaving down as far as his overall shot attempts go, but it is still Jimmy at a reasonable enough price in a pretty soft matchup against Toronto. So no real worries about the Jimmy play. Like where we're at on FanDuel, and if you want to, at worst, level it off to the field on DraftKings, it's probably a matter of just a few shares. I think that's probably a good idea. Because he's not slate breaking as far as the price. I'm sure you can get that in combination with your Jalen shares. It's not a difficult proposition. They only share small forward, so you get advantageous positioning out of it. So 30% would be like my low threshold on Jimmy, and I would say that we could take that upward a little bit. You could probably even advance it to the point where you're building a little bit of a position beyond the field if you slant your lineups that way, if there's enough viable constructions anyway. It's one of the few players with truly established upside into the 50 and change range. It's probably all pissed off after everything that's been going on in the media. Nuke likes him. Jimmy 7X today. Yeah, we'll get him in range. Again, I just think the price is good. It fully accounts for any kind of diminishment as far as the usage numbers go. Getting a 1.12 player for that price, I mean, technically, and it's different, right? It is a different situation for Jalen today. So this is only talking about this number against when they created that $8,600 price, because they did not know that Tatum wasn't going to play. For 113 there versus 112 here, there's an $1,100 price difference. You're talking about Jaylen Brown versus Jimmy Butler. If you just mention casually to two, even NBA fans, not necessarily DFS people, which would you rather have, Jaylen Brown or Jimmy Butler? They would think long and hard about that. These are not, dissimilar options in an NBA sense. And in a DFS sense, when they're putting up these numbers, in normal circumstances, there would not have been that big of a gap between the two. Jalen took off like a rocket ship when we lost Jason Tatum. So this is not the rate for Jalen today. He's in like the 1-3 territory. But I do think that justifies some shares of Jimmy. I think he's effectively priced for what he is right now. Mogbo, different play across sites. There's a $33,000 guy. So maybe it was just that we're getting just more of the $3,000 guys a little bit at the forward spots, because we do have a couple that are dropping into the 20s. So $3,900 Mogbo, power forward and center, 25% exposed on the DraftKings slate. On FanDuel, we only got him 2%. He's power forward only over there. I suspect he's just getting boxed out by that price, that value score, and just other values at the position. There's not a lot on the bone there for 4,600. 3,900 and multi-position eligible. Totally different story on DraftKings. Haywood Highsmith, just fine. He's another low-end per minute guy. Relatively safe, mid-20s type minutes. 25.4 on the average. He played 23.5 and put up a 5.5 FanDuel score the other day. Haywood Highsmith is capable of doing that to you on any given night. This is a low-end performer who does not take a lot of shots, does not rebound or create assists. I'm really not sure what he does other than run up and down the basketball court. Al Horford for just $5,000, just 2% exposed on FanDuel, but we did get 10% of Al on DraftKings. It could be a decent Al day. Anytime Al steps into a couple additional minutes beyond the 28.5 that he plays, he carries a reasonable rate with him. 0.84 per minute, though, this year on DraftKings, 0.83 FanDuel. That's down from where we saw him last year, down from the Al Horford of old. But he's capable. I mean, that is a reasonable enough pivot option at those positions for that price. Even if he only plays 28, you're still okay at that price point. Timmy, we talked about Tobias Harris. Never a big fan. We had him less than the field on both sites. 5% essentially on FanDuel, 8% on DraftKings, a little bit less than the field. 0.92 per minute on DraftKings, 0.91 per minute on FanDuel. Just another player from Detroit. Where do I really, really want to throw Tobias Harris into Boston today when I've got so many options at the position? I do think he could be an effective enough player as just... He slotted into a handful of my lineups just as, just another guy. But prioritizing Tobias today in any kind of sense, like beyond 10% on either site, I think is a pretty big mistake. Not a good price or position fit today. That does not mean, again, as most of you know, that does not mean necessarily that Tobias can't succeed today. But on this side of lock, that's not a good fit. Beantown, what's going on, man? Long time no see. Jimmy, the ultimate narrative player. Yeah, and again, I mean, if people missed it, his agent was going nuts on Shams yesterday. Shams reported that he'd be open to, the Suns, I think was the report that he dropped in there. And then his agent was like, yeah, what are you talking about? You're just making shit up, going at each other on Twitter. How much of that does Jimmy get pissed at? Who knows? Is Jimmy mad at the league for that, or is he just mad at his agent because it was true? I'm sure it was true. Sham's not in the business of just making up rumors. He's not that guy. So, did he get it from Jimmy's agent? Probably not. Did he get it from a very reliable source that he considers gold before he reports something around league circles? I'm pretty confident. So, yeah, Jimmy, narrative street, I get it. And it's a great spot. I mean, he is just effectively priced in the mid-7s. I would just be taking shares of that with or without the narrative. going up against Toronto. Should be able to do basically whatever he wants for the time that he's out there. Jaime Jaquez, mix and match piece further down the board. 2% FanDuel, 4% DraftKings. Below the field on both. It's just a mix and match guy. There's nothing special there. The one that there, actually the two that are interesting, but more so RJ Barrett. I guess it's a price thing. He's a little bit more expensive. 89 both forward spots on FanDuel. 88 small forward only on DraftKings doesn't do him any favors. Pretty firm undercut to the field at 3% on DK, 8% on FanDuel. Let's see where they actually have them. This is probably actually changed by now. Ooh, yeah, that's a big number. Pretend I didn't show you that. So that is a gigantic undercut to the field in our sims here. If you wanted to kick them back up into like the 10, 12% range against that near 30% ownership that we just saw, I think that's fine. You're grabbing a pretty viable upside player. But as far as how everything else falls on the slate, you're just sacrificing shares of better looking options the more that you go to RJ at 88. Give me Jalen at 82 in this situation every single time over RJ at 88 at small forward. It's just a much, much better situation, price, everything for Jaylen Brown today. So that's almost exactly, I'm sure, where our shares of RJ are landing. It's just we're getting more Trey, we're getting more Jalen, we're getting more Herb Jones, et cetera, down all these small forward eligible guys. If he had multi-position, maybe we get him a little bit more. But he doesn't, we don't, and we can move on. I do think, again, you can take him up to 10, 12% and be perfectly okay. But I don't know that you want to live at the 30% range. Could RJ go out and succeed and put up a 50+? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's even, good odds of it, I'd say. I don't think it's unreasonable. Is that even a standard deviation from the number I have? If you haven't seen the projections in the last couple of days, minutes and standard deviations are now on the projections for you. So you can quibble with my minutes assignments all that you like. No dynamic changes in it. You can't change 30 to 28 and expect the projection to change on there. But you can do the math in your head. I know that this guy's around a point per minute, so if I take 2 minutes away, I'll take 2 points away. Yeah, you guys know how it works. But yeah, that's to put up a 50-point game on DraftKings today. That would be right about or slightly below a standard deviation. So just one. So a non-crazy outlier game for RJ puts him in the 50% range. You need more than that. For those prices, you're going to need more, especially with the upside of guys from up here just completely obliterating his score. Or at least in a points per dollar sense, obliterating it and providing levers for everybody else. And then there's DeRozan, 7,600. Just continues to be like my least favorite option from that team while we still do see him a fair amount of the time. He's always, reasonably priced as compared to a lot of more appealing forwards like RJ Barrett, like Jaylen Brown. 79 on DraftKings, both forward spots, 76 on FanDuel, same thing. 1.06, 1.04, you can see the performance is not nearly, in a per minute sense, what these other guys give you. He's just a flawed overall player while still seeing a fair amount of usage and providing the occasional reasonably big upside day. He also plays a ton of minutes. So again, on a short slate, only 3 games, at points, there is value in just buying security of minutes. And everybody at the top of Sacramento plays just rock solid mid-30s minutes with upside to the 38 range. But still, give me Keegan Murray here for better price. 59. Maybe if he didn't exist there, we'd be getting more of DeRozan at his higher price. But considering the spot and the results here, just give me Keegan Murray shares. Give me the exact same spot with the cheaper guy. Yeah, it's a big per minute difference, 0.75 versus 1.06, but that's what the salary's for. Better overall fit across the board. Keegan Murray. Beasley, nothing on FanDuel, 1% on DraftKings, also 1% of $3,000 Ron Holland. I've got him at 16 minutes. I might just knock him down by 2 minutes just so you don't end up with shares of him in your process here. I really don't like that spot. I don't, outside of the fact that he is the dead minimum and like the only semi-viable guy projected for any minutes at the dead min. That's where those shares came from anyway. But this is not a good spot. 0.73 per minute on DraftKings so far this season. That's why he's the dead min. He flat out might not play. So, not my favorite. Glad we didn't get him on FanDuel. Again, I might kick that down to 14 minutes just to take a point and change away from him. 1.4. And then I think we wouldn't get him. Agbaji is coming up on FanDuel. 7.3%, level with the field for 4,600. Reasonable option. Even though he's a 0.75 per minute guy, 13.1% usage, low end rate guy. 4.78 value score is not nothing compared to everybody outside of those top 6 options. That's our next highest value guy on FanDuel, technically. He's got a relatively solid 32-minute projection. Plays 30.8 a night, 31.5 the other day. He put up a 21 on FanDuel. That's substandard. But as far as guys who are just not getting ownership from the field, 7% level with the field. If you have 12, you've got a position. If you've got 15, you've got a bigger position. You might be wasting some shares, though. But that's an interesting one to keep in your pocket as far as just that $4,600 movable price. And I missed him when we were breaking down the guards. I realized that he's guard only on FanDuel. That's semi-interesting. I'm always on the lookout for guys who are just purely owned in the single digits on a 2 or 3 game slate like this, where there is a reasonable expectation of 30-plus minutes. As I said a couple times already on the show, at a point, just paying for secure minutes, especially paying a good price for them, has value. So that's one to keep in mind on FanDuel, not at all on DraftKings. You can get to a couple mix and match shares of him on DraftKings maybe, but he's 54. That is just a wildly different play and honestly kind of a pretty hard misprice. I don't really know how they arrived at 54 for a 0.75 per minute guy. Heard we talked about Ajer Thompson. No love on FanDuel. No love on DraftKings. I've only got him at 13 minutes. There's just a crunch of guys in the mid-teens minutes that show very little value on DraftKings. Ajer, Paul Reed, Fontecchio, Holland, all meh. I would throw Stewart unless he comes up into probably that mix as well, unless we get no Duran. We'll see where he landed in a minute. Don't put him in that list yet. But yeah, just some low-end pieces and parts with these low teens minutes guys, and nobody really cheap enough outside of those Ronnie Holland shares that I think are kind of an illusion there. Nobody really cheap enough to create value. Again, if we get no Duran, though, that changes. The enter key on the number pad on the right side of this keyboard, I hit it so much that it's dead now. Or it's not dead, but it's dying. So I have to mash the enter key. Got to change my habits and use the main one. So let's see. Where are we on Isaiah Stewart? There he is. Whoops. So 8% for 3,600. That's a reasonable enough. That's kind of cheap already. I've got him at 22 minutes, right about his average. He's an okay enough performer for that price. That's kind of interesting now, just for a very, very cheap option. 5.5 plus value score on DraftKings. On FanDuel, that option doesn't really exist in the same way. 4.42 value score, but we are actually getting some shares. I think there's maybe just a little bit of a dearth of options at those positions. For him to land in those lineups at that value score, that's kind of surprising. I wonder how that came together. Hold on. I want to see this just real quick with FanDuel center positioning. I wouldn't have. It's 3%. This is essentially meaningless, but I just wouldn't have expected it. Like, look how he looks compared to everybody else who was getting shares. You could argue that Horford's kind of in that same boat. But with both of those guys as center only, 10% center only there, yeah, that's a weird little outlier of shares. There's no good explanation for that. Because I was thinking, maybe he fell at center a couple times of all these guys. Maybe this guy and that guy fell at power forward so many times that it blocked it off, but doesn't really seem like. Interesting. Anyway, if Duren comes off the board, his 24 minutes disappear, then I think Stewart gets at least appreciable uptick from that and would gain ground pretty quickly. He's a .92 player on DraftKings, a .96 player on FanDuel this year. That's in 22 minutes a night over 25 games. 0.76 last year. So the truth probably lies somewhere in between. Where'd he go? I've got him closer to the current year number than the previous year number. What would happen, I think, in that situation was I would take his rate down slightly as the minutes increase so that we don't get completely imbalanced to him. But we'll see what happens with that spot. Paul Reed would also pick up a couple minutes in that situation and potentially also show a little bit of value. He's the dead min, 3,000. He's a 1.04 per minute player in minimal opportunity this year, 11 games, 10 minutes a night. Do not go there unless you get that differentiated situation. More reasonable plays, better expectations. Kristaps, 50% of our 50+% of our FanDuel lineups, 58% of our DraftKings lineups. Very effectively priced on DK for just 7,300 center only, but absolutely mashed the Kristaps button right alongside the Jaylen Brown button tonight. Those guys benefit major when Tatum is out. Messi, 33%. That's a decent chunk of Yves Messi. It's level with the field, but I think that's a reasonable spot. 1.02 per minute so far. Played 31-6 the other day, gave us a 43.8 FanDuel score. That's dynamite at 5,600. Doesn't need to get to that level. Would be nice if he does, but I'll take a 39. I'd rather have my 43. But that's not a terrible option at center on the FanDuel slate. If you escape the upside games from, you would probably just have them alongside Porzingis at power forward. But if you escape the upside game from Pirtle, Sabonis has power forward eligibility, so it matters less. Among the center only guys on FanDuel, you really need to only fade the upside game out of Pirtle, Bam, and that's really it. Maybe Duren, but probably not. So even if Messi goes out and underperforms this and just has a standard game right around here or gets to that 38-39, I don't think it kills you. DraftKings, you got more flexibility and you've got him in a ton of your lineups. 5,000 over there. You get multiple bites at the apple at center, which is good because you have fewer guys with that multi-position eligibility. But as long as I can put one at center and one at util, I'm fine. And you're going to want to do that. Let's see. Among center-only guys on DraftKings, that's 165% of our shares across 150 lineups go to center-only guys. So that's a lot of lineups where you're going center util with two centers. Pirtle, really strong piece, 1.19 per minute FanDuel, 1.17 per minute DraftKings. For 7,700, that creates a nice value. 557 on DraftKings is above our threshold, but it's a little bit less valuable than he is on the FanDuel slate. At the higher FanDuel price, his FanDuel projection bounces off, creates a better points per dollar market, our 556 value score, where we're looking for 5. 30% exposed on FanDuel and level with the field. I wouldn't mind having a little bit more. 26% if you're back at 30% and even with the field on DraftKings, perfectly fine. Not a mistake. Definitely one of the better upside pieces at the position on this slate on either side today. Y says, this Taco Bell is making my stomach hurt. Michael Knack says, don't eat fast food. It's poison. It is poison, but it's also delicious. I like Taco Bell. I like McDonald's. I'm unapologetic about liking fast food. Definitely horrible for you. Don't mistake my meaning. I think I've said it on shows before. Like, one thing I do like about it, like, people badmouth like McDonald's or whatever. I've had my issues recently with McDonald's. But the thing that I love about them, and this isn't my point originally, I heard it somewhere, but like, you can walk into a McDonald's in Australia, you can walk into a McDonald's in New Jersey, you can walk into a McDonald's in Beijing, China, and you can get the same experience. You can get an order of fries, and it's going to taste the same. You know how hard that is to accomplish? Just that alone is noteworthy. Like, that is amazing. And there's value there, right? It gives you, if you're away, like if you were a foreign national, you're living in Beijing, let's say. Every now and then you sneak down to McDonald's and get a taste of home. Like, that's nice. It's a good thing to have. Are they a gigantic evil corporation that's poisoning the world? Sure, of course. But who's not? Beantown likes the McRib. Demon Nat likes Chick-fil-A. I will say that their chicken is good from what I remember. I haven't eaten there in years, though. Don't like giving my money to those guys. Doesn't make sense to buy McDonald's or BK when Chipotle is the same price. I do like Chipotle. It's good. You go Chipotle or Qdoba? We always had Qdoba in Hoboken when I was living down there. It was like right around the corner. We basically lived there. And then they opened a Chipotle. I was always, kind of favorite Qdoba, but they're essentially the same thing. Millie's got 3 live lineups in best ball on DK. All right. Out of how many? What was your advance rate? I'm not a best ball player, but I know the question to ask anyway. Exactly where is the dollar menu gotten from McDonald's? It's now the $4 menu. Yeah, the pricing on those things is absurd compared to what you used to pay. And I know that, like, you can't expect the same actual price, but like relative to your bank account, that should stay consistent over time, and it most certainly has not. But yeah, that is not a thing anymore, unfortunately. It's amazing what $1 used to buy you. Anyway, let's wrap this center position up. Like Chipotle more, take Qdoba. Yeah, Chipotle was always, a good, yummy kind of experience, and like you feel like you're not getting the worst of the worst fast food wise. But then, like, what was it, a few years ago when they made all those people sick? I was like, oh, maybe it's not so good. 3 out of 55. All right. Hopefully they're a very solid 3. Let's hope we can turn that into a profit, Millie. Yeah, I just don't have the patience to enter a bunch of stuff in, like, outside of season long, obviously. To enter a bunch of stuff like that and just sit there looking at it all season long with no control over anything from that point on. Like, season long, I can make moves, I can make trades, best ball just doesn't speak to me. Maybe I'll get into it in the future. Definitely I'll try next year to have some content for it, though. If we played our Dynasty League best ball, I would be obliterating this league. Like I said before, I got to within 700 points now of first place in our crazy scoring system. It's essentially everything is worth 10 times what it is in a normal format because these guys created this league before Yahoo football existed. But yeah, I've clawed my way back to within 700 points. I've probably left triple that on my bench through the season. So if we were playing best ball, I'd be crushing these guys. Gonna win the league, though. 4 more weeks? Gonna win the league. What else have we not talked about? Kelly O. Didn't get him on FanDuel. Didn't get him on DraftKings. 6,000? Ooh, that's a big ticket. Yeah, unless something changes around Kelly O, I really don't see paying 6,000 for him in any sense on DraftKings. On FanDuel for 44, maybe you could toss a couple shares in just on the short slate. Anything can happen kind of nature of it, but he's not looking like much more than a lotto ticket right now. Kevin Love not really coming up, 4,100. He's very, very cheap, and he's a terrific per minute guy. I wouldn't mind a few shares maybe of Kevin Love, but he's really short on minutes. 14 minutes. He's playing 12 a night. Even on a short slate, we're really not getting there. The field looks like it's there a little bit because he's 3,400 on DraftKings. Is there a way I can get a couple Kevin Love shares into your guys' lives without ruining everything? He's projected for nearly 10% ownership on DraftKings. Holy shit. So, the ownership that the Sims run against, you guys know where it comes from. I just said it. They've got him around 10%. We got him 0 at 3,400. I've actually got him about a point higher than they do. And we didn't get him. I do think it's an excellent option in terms of being a very, very cheap source of per minute upside. I don't know that we'd get enough minutes to make it totally viable to compete with all the shares we're getting to these guys. With a potentially emergent value if Duran doesn't go coming out of Detroit. I want to justify sinking shares into Kevin Love because, I mean, look at that 147 per minute for 3,400. That's crazy. But it's just not getting there. And if I give him any more than this, it just wouldn't be correct. Am I reading this right? Let me see. So I've got him. I do have him closer to this, to the 119. The difference in projection that I mentioned comes from I've got him for 2 more minutes than they do. They've only got him at 12 minutes to create that 10%. So honestly, if they were at 14%, they'd be projecting him for like probably 20% ownership or 15, 18. They must be giving him the full 147. Let me see. I knew I could find something interesting to talk about at the end of the show. What do I need to bonus him to get him to that? There, and then I would have to take 2 minutes off over here. I know this is not the most exciting thing to watch, but I think it's at least semi worth talking about. Let's come to that. Yeah, they're giving him the full 1.45 that he's put up in short sample so far this year. I think Kevin Love's phenomenal. I don't know that I'm willing to go to the full value there. I kind of did it more with minutes. And I've got him at 1, 2, 3. I could give him a little bit more. And maybe that's what I'll do so that he does pop up in a few lineups. And I'll try and keep it as appropriate as possible. Like if I give him that, it takes him to 1. If I just add a point to him, I've got a little cheater column here that I can just add points if I need to. Gets him to 18 DraftKings points. It's just 1.30, so it's under what he's done this season. Right basically between this year and last year. I'm going to flag that and continue to consider it. It's only 6:15. The slate starts at 7:30, so I got a few minutes. If you see him at 18 on DraftKings, and this is only relevant really to DraftKings, but if you see him go to 18 plus, and it would be essentially exactly 1 point additional, you can feel free to put him into a few lineups. If you see him go higher than 18, then start putting him into more and more lineups because something went different. I forgot. You'll also see just, if I change minutes, you'll see it change on the sheet now. That's a really interesting spot, though. For 41, I don't think it's nearly the same proposition on FanDuel. The 34, though, makes it interesting, and the fact that the field's getting there. But again, the way we mathed out, maybe have a handful of shares and let the field have their 10%. Have them in 2%, just to have a couple. If you're building one, I don't think he goes in it. Which is difficult to say with that per minute mark staring me in the face at 3,400. I almost did it. I don't relish the idea of completely cutting Kevin Love out of the DraftKings slate. Keta, mix and match value at best 0% on both sites. Really nobody. 0 shares on all these guys down here. Olenek, Keta, Cornette, Daniel Dice, who will pick up a couple minutes today but seems irrelevant. Everybody else is just onesie, twosie minutes. We do have... how am I sorted by? Let me make sure I covered everybody on DraftKings centers. Do we talk Sabonis? I think I kind of breezed past Sabonis. He's obviously a monster upside player on this slate. 127 FanDuel, 131 DraftKings. We got him a little bit lighter than the field. He's our second most expensive player, so our 2 most expensive players are both coming out of Sacramento today. 12% below the field. If you want to be with the field, that's a perfectly fine player to make that choice on. But we do, again, just have much more compelling options. So I think the Sabonis shares that you take should probably be as a second center, right? When you get one of these and then build out, half the rest of your lineup and then swing back around and say, all right, do I want to invest that 95 in the center spot? And then you can take 15, even 18. You're fine because he's a monster upside player. He's a walking triple-double. So I don't mind additional shares of Sabonis. I think this is about right on FanDuel, though. I don't think you go nuts on FanDuel beyond 35%. DraftKings, it's just to get a few more shares in the raw sense and be more with the field than that far below. I would still probably leave it a little bit shy of the field, though. Horford, we talked about. Bam, we mentioned, but only in a sense of if he underperforms. 8,000 for Bam on FanDuel is not a terrible price for a 1.18 per minute player. 117 for 8,100. Again, very reasonable value prop. 5.34 value score on the FanDuel slate. 5.28 on DraftKings. That's well ahead of our FanDuel value threshold. It's in between on DraftKings. It's not quite to the 5.5, but it's still strong. Makes sense that we're getting more on FanDuel where he's showing more value, but I just would probably rather get shares of this. There's just a little bit more there. He does, though, compare favorably. Even at 5.34, even with Kristaps at 5.40 up at the top. So maybe don't totally sleep on Bam, but out of all the center eligible guys, we're getting less of him than the field. Most notably, right? Everybody else we're closer to the field on. So that's our big position on the at the center spot on both sides. Think that got everybody. Again, nothing change unless you get changes. There's nothing down the bottom of the board on a short slate. Talked about them. We talked about RJ. I don't see anybody that really got lost in the shuffle between different positioning or anything. I think that rounds us out pretty much, gang. Either you guys forgot to remind me or I forgot and missed your reminder, but I forgot to plug the site again. Rotoscouts.com for anybody new out there. I don't want you out there spending hundreds of dollars a month on projections when you're entering $5 worth of lineups a day, $20 worth of lineups a day. If you're a 150 maxer and you've got endless bankroll, well, guess what? My projections still work for you. But if you want to spend your money, I get it. But Rotoscouts, the overriding philosophy at Rotoscouts is that there's a gigantic population of people out there that shouldn't be paying as much as they're being asked to pay for projections. And that's the community that we're trying to serve. Access to NBA, NHL, and NFL right now, plus MLB when it's in season, under $1 a day for all of it. No per sport, no hidden fees, no suddenly it jumps up to $30 a month. Yeah, it's under $30 a month right now. It's under $1 a day. I think it was, 22, 23, something around there for a month. It was a weekly plan. Under $7 gets you from here to next Thursday. Every main slate of basketball, every main slate of hockey, every showdown slate for football, every main slate for football. So you get the full weekend of football. That alone ought to be worth less than $7. Or that's a clunky way to say that. That alone ought to be worth the $630 or whatever I'm asking you for. Check it out, guys. Rotoscouts.com. Clunky plug. Let me pull up some Ace Mind lineups that, again, our sims run over at Ace Mind, and I strongly encourage you guys to check them out as well. acemind.io. Excellent sim tools, and honestly, those guys have similar, I haven't really, straight up discussed it with them, but based on their pricing, I would say they have pretty similar value structure as far as not wanting to break people's bank and provide them with rock solid, powerful tools. So this is where this ran against. Promo code RotoScouts over at acemind.io, by the way. Gets you 20% off your first month. And these are just going to be giant populations of everybody that we saw just in different orders. It's one of those slates. That's why I don't dive too much into the lineup constructions when we're 2-3 games. It's a lot more interesting to talk through. All right, we can spend here, we can save here when there's differentiated situations. With such a short slate, you can see it's just the same names in different orders with slight mixers. A lot of Celtics. That's an interesting question. Look at all those Boston 4s. Right here. Boston 4, Boston 4, Boston 2, Miami 2, Boston 4, Boston 4, Boston 4, and on and on and on. So to answer the question that was on everybody's mind but didn't get asked, or maybe it did get asked and I missed it. 4-man Boston, perfectly fine. 3-man Boston, probably at a minimum. Although we do have a decently performing 2-man there. Start with 2 and build your way up. Do not go fewer than 2 guys from Boston. I think that would be egregious. I don't have a yearly plan right now, but I do have a quarterly every 3 months. And there's a sliding scale, right? Weekly is closer to $1 a day. Quarterly is the furthest from $1 a day. You save by going quarterly. So, it's a year I didn't want to put on the board in the first year of charging people just because I wasn't entirely sure how things would go. Thank you guys, by the way, for signing up and making me much more encouraged about that. We've gotten a nice wave of signups, and I appreciate every single one of you and know that I do see them come through. So I really do appreciate it. But yearly's easier to hide from the wife. Look, if she catches you, tell her all about the savings. Tell her, look, honey, I could pay the same amount for a month of one sport over at that other site that I used to go to. I'm saving the family money. I'm making a sound investment. I should be patted on the back for spending money here for DFS. But, I tell you what, Javier, if I don't know if you're in our Discord, I'll drop a link to that right now. At worst, I mean, if you seriously do need that, I'm sure, carve out a little special membership for you. That wouldn't be overly difficult for me to do. So jump into the Discord and shoot me a DM or just ping me in one of the channels, and we can definitely talk about getting that set up. No problem. Oh, I used to go to the only Taco Bell in Madrid all the time. They do have beer in Spain. Yeah, it depends on, in the States, depends on where you're living as far as whether you can get like a beer at McDonald's, a beer at Taco Bell, and whatever. Jersey, you most definitely cannot. Jersey is one of the strictest states in the union as far as alcohol licensing, which is weird. Across the river, though, in the city you can. So, a lot of Celtics, a lot of Pellies. That is the name of the game today, and then just drop top-end plays into the other spots. I'll pull up some FanDuel real quick here, and then we will jump. Same deal on FanDuel, right? Short slate. We're just going to see guys moving around, especially with the dupe positions. A lot of Messi shares going through the center spot. There is a fair amount of mix at center, but it is mostly, I would say, the center-only guys. And then you get power forward guys into the power forward spots, which makes sense. A lot of commonality on the front end over here. These are, if you look at that as a block, that's all essentially the same names in different order. Celtics. Say it again. When Tatum's out, those guys shoot through the roof. 4 Celtics on FanDuel, perfectly fine. I will say that it looks like we do have an abundance of 3-man Celtic stacks on the FanDuel slate versus the 4-mans that we were seeing. We're getting some 4-mans on FanDuel, but it looks like for FanDuel, 3 is the better option. We're really not getting many 2s. Here's a big chunk of New Orleans 4s, though. Jeez. So Boston 3-mans on FanDuel, Boston 4-mans on DraftKings is perfectly fine, but 3-mans is also quite good. I think that's a pretty sound approach and a pretty good point to bail out. We're coming up on an hour and a half. We got 30 people still here hanging out. You guys totally rock. Love when we get good numbers on the shows. Love the regulars. Hit the like button for me. It helps out quite a bit. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, it costs you nothing. Click that little bell down there. Do me a favor. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. At 1,000 on YouTube, you can do things like, super chats, which obviously is, to my benefit, but you can do better things. It helps us grow. Right? So if you hit it, I really appreciate every single one of you that subscribes, and you can just turn the notification off. You never, ever have to worry about it. You'll forget that you ever clicked it. So just do that for me if you get a chance. I appreciate you guys. Tell your family and friends over Christmas too. I'd love to have it over 1,000 before the new year. Outside of that, guys, let me go get some projection updates in. Rotoscouts.com. Check it out. We are coming up on an hour from lock. Plenty of time. Hockey's up there. Football's up there. I'll take a tour through football, make sure we're where we need to be for that too. And otherwise, good luck out there. Somebody go win something. We'll be back for more tomorrow. Full slate tomorrow. Should be fun. Later, gang.